Good evening. Welcome to Buddhism for Bedtime. It's time to relax and put your mind at ease for the night. Before we begin, please feel free to share what time it is and where you are listening from. Tonight, as the day slowly fades behind you and the concerns of waking life begin to drift into the distance, we will journey together into the ancient world of one of history's most influential and compassionate teachers. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to remember, no lesson you must learn. Simply listen. Allow the story to unfold at its own gentle pace, like ripples spreading across the surface of a still pond. As you settle comfortably, perhaps beneath a blanket or resting your head upon a soft pillow, let your breathing become natural and unhurried. With each breath, allow the mind to loosen its grip upon the events of the day. The emails can wait. The unfinished tasks can wait. Tomorrow can wait. For now, there is only this quiet moment and the timeless story we are about to explore. Tonight, we travel back more than 25 centuries to the northern plains of ancient India. It was a world very different from our own. There were no automobiles moving along crowded roads, no glowing screens illuminating dark rooms, no cities stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Instead, vast forests covered the land. Ancient rivers wound their way across fertile valleys. Merchants traveled slowly along dusty roads. Farmers worked the earth with simple tools. Kings ruled small kingdoms surrounded by walls of stone and timber. Life moved more slowly then. The rhythm of existence was shaped by the rising and setting of the sun, the changing seasons, and the flowing waters of great rivers. In this distant world, stories were carried by travelers. Wisdom was passed from teacher to student, and beneath the shade of banyan trees, seekers gathered to discuss the mysteries of life, questions that continue to fascinate humanity even today. Why do we suffer? Why do we fear loss? Can lasting peace be found? Is there a path beyond worry and sorrow? These questions are as old as civilization itself. Long before modern science, long before the great empires of history, thoughtful men and women pondered the nature of existence. Among them was a young prince whose search for understanding would eventually transform the spiritual history of the world. His name was Siddhartha Gautama. Today, millions know him by another title, the Buddha, the Awakened One. But before he became a teacher, before monks and pilgrims carried his teachings across Asia, before temples and monasteries were built in his honor, Siddhartha was simply a child born into privilege, a child protected from hardship, a child whose life seemed destined to follow a familiar path. Yet beneath the comfort and beauty of his surroundings, a quiet question was already waiting. A question that would eventually lead him away from wealth, power, and certainty. A question that would carry him deep into forests, across dusty roads, and into long years of searching. That search forms the heart of our story tonight. But before we meet Siddhartha himself, let us take a moment to imagine the world into which he was born. Picture rolling green fields stretching toward distant mountains. Picture villages nestled beside rivers. Imagine the scent of wood fires drifting through the evening air, the sound of birds settling into the trees, the soft ringing of bells from distant temples. As darkness falls across the landscape, Travelers gather around small fires. Stories are told. Meals are shared. Children listen with wide eyes as elders speak of gods, heroes, kings, and sages. The night sky above them is brilliant, unspoiled by modern lights. Thousands of stars shine overhead, each one appearing sharp and clear against the darkness. For many people living in this ancient world, the heavens seemed filled with mystery. The stars marked the passage of time. The moon governed festivals and rituals. The changing seasons shaped every aspect of daily life. Human beings felt deeply connected to the natural world around them. Mountains, rivers, forests, animals, all were woven together into a single living tapestry. It was within this world of beauty and uncertainty that Siddhartha Gautama entered history. His story has been told for more than 2,000 years. Different cultures have preserved it in different ways. Some parts belong to recorded history. Others have been enriched by legend and tradition. As with many ancient figures, the exact details have softened with time. Yet the essence of the story remains remarkably powerful. It is the story of a human being searching for answers, not through conquest, not through wealth, not through power, but through observation, reflection, compassion, and understanding. Perhaps that is one reason his story continues to resonate today. Even in our modern world, many people find themselves asking the same questions that stirred within Siddhartha long ago. How do we find peace? How do we live with change? How do we face loss? How do we cultivate kindness in a world that can often feel uncertain? Tonight, we will walk beside him as he seeks those answers. We will visit royal palaces and quiet forests. We will encounter wandering teachers and devoted followers. We will witness moments of doubt, perseverance, insight, and awakening. And as our journey unfolds, there is no need to analyze every detail. No need to memorize names or dates. Allow the story to wash over you like a gentle stream. Let the images rise and fall naturally within your imagination. If your thoughts begin to wander, that is perfectly fine. Simply return to the sound of the story whenever you wish. And if sleep comes before our journey is complete, then let it come peacefully. The story will continue without effort, like a river flowing quietly beneath the moonlight. And now, as the night grows deeper and the world around you becomes still, let us travel together to a small kingdom nestled near the foothills of the Himalayas, a kingdom known as the land of the Shakyas. It is there that our story truly begins. It is there that a child named Siddhartha Gautama is about to enter the world. And with his birth, the course of history will slowly begin to change. Before we witness the birth of Siddhartha Gautama, let us spend a little time becoming familiar with the world that surrounded him. For every life is shaped, in some way, by the age into which it is born. The ancient world of Siddhartha was not yet a land of vast empires. There were no towering capitals controlling entire continents. No great armies marching beneath the banners of powerful emperors. Instead, northern India was a patchwork of kingdoms, republics, forests, villages, and trade routes. Each region possessed its own customs, traditions, rulers, and beliefs. The landscape itself was breathtaking. To the north stood the mighty Himalayas. Their snow-covered peaks rose into the sky like silent guardians watching over the plains below. Many of the mountains remained untouched and unexplored. To the people of the time, they inspired wonder, reverence, and mystery. Countless rivers flowed southward from these high elevations. The rivers nourished fertile valleys where villages and towns flourished. Fields of rice, barley, wheat, and millet stretched across the countryside. Farmers worked from dawn until dusk, following rhythms that had changed little over generations. Life was deeply connected to nature. The changing seasons determined nearly every aspect of daily existence. When rains arrived, crops flourished. When drought came, hardship followed. People learned to observe the natural world closely. The arrival of birds, the flowering of trees, the movement of clouds, the behavior of animals, all carried meaning, all provided clues about the future. As evening descended across the countryside, villagers gathered together. Families shared simple meals. Stories were told beside flickering lamps. Children listened as elders recounted tales of heroes, sages, kings, and ancient gods. Long before books became common, memory was treasured. Knowledge lived within people. Stories were passed from one generation to the next through careful repetition. Many of the teachings that survive today endured because countless individuals remembered and shared them over centuries. It was a world where listening was considered a skill. Patience was valued. Silence was familiar. For most people, life remained close to home. A farmer might spend his entire life within a few miles of the village where he was born. Yet despite this local way of life, trade connected distant regions. Merchants traveled long roads carrying goods from kingdom to kingdom. They transported textiles, spices, precious stones, metals, medicines, and ideas. Along these trade routes, cultures met and influenced one another. A traveler might encounter unfamiliar languages, customs, and philosophies. As merchants exchanged goods, they also exchanged stories. And stories often carried wisdom. Northern India during this period was alive with intellectual curiosity. Many thoughtful people sought answers to life's deepest questions. They debated the nature of reality. They discussed the purpose of human existence. They wondered whether suffering could be overcome. Teachers wandered from village to village sharing their views. Some lived simple lives in forests. Others gathered followers who studied under them for many years. Unlike many societies throughout history, ancient India offered a remarkable diversity of spiritual perspectives. There was no single answer accepted by everyone. Many paths existed. Many questions remained open. In forests and remote wilderness areas, seekers devoted themselves to meditation and contemplation. These individuals were often known as ascetics. Some lived with very few possessions. Others practiced extreme forms of self-discipline. Many believed that wisdom could be discovered by withdrawing from ordinary life. The sight of wandering holy men was not unusual. Travelers might encounter them beneath trees, along roads, or resting beside rivers. Some wore simple robes. Some carried little more than a bowl. Some spent long periods in silence. To ordinary villagers, these wandering seekers represented a different way of living. A life dedicated not to wealth or status, but to understanding. The spiritual atmosphere of the time was rich and dynamic. Ideas were constantly being explored. Questions were encouraged. Debates sometimes lasted for hours. Kings occasionally invited philosophers and teachers to their courts. People were eager to hear new perspectives. The search for truth was woven deeply into the culture. At the center of much spiritual life were teachings preserved in ancient texts known as the Vedas. These sacred writings formed the foundation of religious traditions that had developed over many centuries. Priests conducted rituals and ceremonies. Offerings were made. Prayers were recited. Festivals marked important moments throughout the year. For many people, these traditions provided structure, meaning, and connection. Yet not everyone felt satisfied. Some wondered whether rituals alone could solve the problems of human suffering. Others questioned whether lasting happiness could be found through wealth or social status. Many sought a more direct understanding of life itself. These questions created fertile ground for new ideas. It was an age of searching, an age of inquiry, an age in which people were willing to look beyond familiar answers. Among the various communities of northern India was a small republic known as the Shakya clan. This community occupied territory near the foothills of the Himalayas, close to what is today the border region between India and Nepal. The Shakyas were not among the largest or most powerful kingdoms, yet they enjoyed stability and prosperity. Their lands were fertile, their people worked hard, their leaders governed with relative independence. Within this community lived a respected ruler named Suddhodana. He belonged to a noble family and held an important position among the Shakya people. His household enjoyed comfort, influence, and security. His wife, Queen Maya, was admired for her grace and dignity. Together they occupied a prominent place within their society. At first glance, their lives appeared blessed, yet they shared a hope common to many families throughout history. They wished for a child, a son who might one day continue their lineage, a child who would inherit responsibility for the future. As the years passed, anticipation quietly grew. Neither Suddhodana nor Maya could have imagined how significant that child would become. The world around them certainly could not have known. The farmers tending their fields, the merchants traveling dusty roads, the fishermen casting nets into rivers, the monks meditating beneath trees. None could foresee that a child born within the Shakya community would eventually influence millions of lives across centuries and continents. History often unfolds in this way. Great transformations rarely announce themselves. They begin quietly, a conversation, a decision, a question, a birth. At the time, Siddhartha's arrival would seem no different from countless other births. A family welcoming a child into the world, a mother holding her newborn son, a father looking toward the future with hope. And yet, from these simple beginnings, a remarkable journey would emerge. A journey not of conquest or empire, not of military victories or political power, but of understanding, compassion, awakening. For now, however, that future remains unseen. The forests still whisper beneath evening winds. The rivers continue their patient journey toward the sea. The stars shine above the northern plains just as they have for countless generations. And somewhere within the peaceful lands of the Shakyas, the moment approaches. A child is about to be born. A child whose search for truth will echo through the ages. As we continue our story, Let the ancient world remain vivid in your imagination. The mountain foothills, the quiet villages, the wandering seekers, the endless sky filled with stars, all form the backdrop to one of history's most enduring and inspiring lives. And in our next chapter, we will witness the birth of Siddhartha Gautama and explore the remarkable legends that surrounded his arrival into the world. As our journey through the ancient world continues, let us now turn our attention to a story that has been told for more than 2,000 years. It is a story that begins not with a kingdom or a palace, but with a dream. Throughout history, many cultures have preserved special stories surrounding the births of extraordinary individuals. These stories are often woven from both history and legend. Over time, facts and symbolism blend together, creating narratives that express deeper truths about the lives they describe. The story of Siddhartha Gautama is no exception. As we explore these traditions tonight, there is no need to separate every detail into categories of history or myth. Instead, simply allow the story to unfold as it has been shared across generations. Imagine a quiet evening in the palace of the Shakya people. The day has come to an end. The air is still. The sounds of activity have faded into silence. Soft lantern light glows against polished walls. Servants move quietly through the corridors. Outside, the stars begin to appear above the northern plains. Within the palace rests Queen Maya. Respected throughout the kingdom for her grace and kindness, she is said to have experienced a remarkable dream. In that dream, a magnificent white elephant descended from the heavens. The elephant carried a white lotus flower in its trunk. With great gentleness, it approached the queen and entered her side. The dream was vivid, peaceful, radiant. When Maya awoke, she felt a profound sense of calm and wonder. The dream seemed unlike any she had experienced before. According to tradition, wise men and court scholars were summoned to interpret its meaning. After careful reflection, they offered an extraordinary prediction. The child soon to be born, they said, would be destined for greatness. He would become either a mighty ruler whose influence would spread far across the world, or a great spiritual teacher whose wisdom would guide countless people. The prophecy lingered in the minds of those who heard it. But for the moment, it remained only a possibility. The future was still hidden beyond the horizon. Months passed peacefully. As the time of birth approached, Queen Maya prepared to travel to the home of her family, following a custom observed by many women of her era. The journey led through beautiful countryside. Roads wound between forests and open fields. The mountains stood quietly in the distance. Birdsong drifted through the morning air. Eventually, Maya arrived at a place known as Lumbini. Today, Lumbini is recognized as one of the most important pilgrimage sites in the Buddhist world. But on that day long ago, it was simply a peaceful garden. Imagine the scene. Tall trees offering welcome shade, gentle breezes moving through their branches, flowers blooming across the landscape, the fragrance of blossoms carried on the air, sunlight filtering softly through leaves overhead. It was here, according to tradition, that Siddhartha Gautama entered the world. The setting feels almost symbolic. Not a battlefield, not a throne room, not a place of power, but a garden, a place of beauty and tranquility. Ancient accounts describe Queen Maya reaching up to grasp the branch of a tree as the moment of birth arrived. Around her stood attendants ready to assist. Nature itself seemed calm and welcoming. The world continued its ordinary rhythms. Birds sang, leaves rustled, clouds drifted overhead, and amidst this peaceful setting, a child was born. The child received the name Siddhartha, a name often translated as one who achieves his purpose or one who attains his goal. No one could yet know how fitting that name would become. To those gathered in the garden, he was simply a newborn child, a son, a prince, a source of joy for his family. Yet according to Buddhist tradition, unusual signs accompanied his birth. Legends tell of flowers blooming out of season, of heavenly beings rejoicing, of extraordinary events that signaled the arrival of a remarkable individual. Whether understood literally or symbolically, these stories reflect the deep significance later generations would attach to Siddhartha's life. For those who preserved these accounts, ordinary descriptions seemed insufficient. His future influence was so profound that storytellers sought images capable of expressing that greatness. News of the birth soon reached the Shakya kingdom. Celebrations followed. Family members rejoiced. Friends offered congratulations. The future appeared bright. King Suddhodana was delighted. His long-awaited son had finally arrived. The royal household filled with happiness. Musicians performed. Guests gathered. The birth of an heir brought hope and stability to the community. Yet amid the celebrations, another event occurred that would become an important part of the Buddha's story. An elderly sage named Asita is said to have visited the child. Asita was known for his wisdom and spiritual insight. Some accounts describe him as a respected hermit who had spent many years in contemplation. When he arrived, he asked to see the newborn prince. The infant Siddhartha was brought before him. The old sage studied the child carefully. At first, a smile spread across his face. He recognized signs that, according to tradition, indicated an extraordinary destiny. But then something unexpected happened. Asita began to weep. The king grew concerned. Had the sage seen danger ahead? Was some misfortune waiting in the future? When asked why he was crying, Asita offered a response that has echoed through the centuries. He explained that his tears were not born from sadness for the child. Rather, they came from sadness for himself. He foresaw that Siddhartha would one day become a fully awakened teacher, a Buddha. His wisdom would illuminate the world. But Asita knew he was already old. He would not live long enough to hear those teachings. He would not witness the fulfillment of the child's destiny. The story captures something deeply human. Even in moments of joy, we recognize the passing of time. Even when greatness is approaching, no individual can witness every chapter of history. Asita's tears remind us that life is precious because it is temporary. Years later, this understanding would become central to the teachings of the Buddha himself. For now, however, Siddhartha remained a small child. The prophecies existed only as possibilities. The future was unwritten. He could not speak. He could not walk. He knew nothing of kingdoms, philosophies, or spiritual quests. Like all children, he depended entirely upon those around him. He slept. He cried. He observed the world with curious eyes. The vast journey ahead remained hidden, yet the people closest to him sensed something special. Perhaps it was the memory of the dream. Perhaps it was the words of the sages. Or perhaps it was simply the love that parents feel when they look upon their child and imagine a bright future. King Suddhodana hoped his son would one day become a great ruler, a leader respected by neighboring kingdoms, a protector of the Shakya people. Such hopes were natural. The king wished to see his family flourish. He wished to preserve stability and prosperity. He envisioned Siddhartha following a path familiar to princes throughout history. Yet life often unfolds in unexpected ways. The future rarely follows the plans we create for it. The child sleeping peacefully in the royal household would eventually walk away from power rather than pursue it. He would leave behind privilege instead of embracing it. He would seek answers not in conquest, but in understanding. Those possibilities still lay far ahead. For now, the kingdom celebrated. The forests swayed gently in the wind. The rivers continued their ancient journey. The stars moved slowly across the night sky. And a young prince rested in the safety of his family's care. His story had only just begun. As we allow the events of this chapter to settle softly in the mind, imagine the peaceful garden of Lumbini beneath the moonlight, the trees standing quietly, the flowers resting in the darkness, the gentle breeze moving through the branches, a newborn child sleeping peacefully, unaware that one day his search for truth would inspire people across continents and centuries. In our next chapter, we will enter the royal palace where Siddhartha spends his early years, sheltered from hardship and surrounded by comfort, as his father attempts to shape a future very different from the one destiny appears to have prepared for him. As the years passed, the infant Siddhartha began to grow. The seasons came and went. Spring flowers bloomed and faded. Summer rains nourished the fields. Autumn brought golden light to the countryside. Winter arrived with cool mornings and clear skies. And within the royal household of the Shakya people, a young prince slowly entered childhood. King Suddhodana never forgot the predictions that had accompanied his son's birth. The words of the sages lingered in his thoughts. One possibility pleased him greatly, that Siddhartha might become a powerful ruler, a wise king, a respected leader who would strengthen the future of the Shakya people. But the other possibility troubled him. The possibility that his son might abandon worldly life and become a wandering spiritual seeker. To the king, such a future felt like a loss. He loved his son deeply. He wanted him close. He wanted him to inherit responsibility, leadership, and honor. And so, according to tradition, Suddhodana resolved to shape Siddhartha's life in a particular way. If suffering inspired spiritual searching, then perhaps suffering could simply be hidden from view. If hardship led people to question the world, perhaps his son could be protected from hardship altogether. The king's intentions were not cruel. In many ways, they were understandable. Like countless parents throughout history, he wanted to spare his child from pain. He wished to create a life filled with happiness and security. Yet sometimes the greatest mysteries of life cannot be avoided simply by turning away from them. For now, however, Siddhartha's world was carefully arranged. He grew up surrounded by beauty. The palace grounds were expansive. Gardens stretched beneath the open sky. Flowering trees offered shade during warm afternoons. Pools reflected drifting clouds. Birds sang from branches overhead. Servants maintained every detail with care. Walkways remained clean. Fountains flowed gently. Every effort was made to create an atmosphere of comfort and peace. As a young boy, Siddhartha explored these surroundings with curiosity. He wandered through gardens. He observed butterflies moving from flower to flower. He listened to birds calling from distant trees. He watched sunlight dance upon the surface of still water. Many accounts describe him as thoughtful from an early age, gentle, observant, less interested in competition than in understanding. While other children might become absorbed in games and contests, Siddhartha often seemed drawn toward quiet reflection. He noticed small things, the movement of leaves, the behavior of animals, the changing colors of the sky. Moments that others might overlook frequently captured his attention. Teachers were brought to the palace to oversee his education. As a prince, Siddhartha received instruction in many subjects. He learned reading and writing. He studied language and poetry. He explored history, tradition, and governance. He trained in the skills expected of a nobleman: archery, horsemanship, swordsmanship, statecraft. His instructors soon discovered that he was an exceptional student. He learned quickly. His memory was strong. His understanding seemed to reach beyond simple memorization. He asked thoughtful questions, questions that sometimes surprised those around him, questions that revealed an unusually reflective mind. Yet despite his intelligence and education, something within him remained quietly unsettled, not unhappy, not dissatisfied, simply curious. It was as though he sensed there was more to life than the comfortable world he inhabited, a deeper understanding waiting just beyond the edge of perception. At this stage, however, those feelings remained vague and undefined. The palace continued to provide every possible pleasure. Musicians performed, entertainers visited, festivals filled the calendar, beautiful garments were prepared, delicious meals appeared daily. Every effort was made to ensure that Siddhartha encountered joy rather than sorrow. The king instructed attendants to shield him from anything disturbing. Those who were sick were kept away. The elderly were rarely seen. Death was never discussed. The unpleasant realities of human existence remained hidden behind the carefully maintained walls of privilege. For many years, the strategy appeared successful. The prince enjoyed comfort and security. Yet reality possesses a remarkable patience. Certain truths can be delayed, but they cannot be hidden forever. One story from Siddhartha's youth offers a glimpse into the compassion that would later define his life. It is said that one day, while walking outdoors, he witnessed a swan fall from the sky. The bird had been struck by an arrow. Wounded and frightened, it landed near him. Siddhartha immediately rushed to its side. He gently gathered the injured creature into his arms. Carefully removing the arrow, he tended to the bird as best he could. Not long afterward, another young noble arrived. The swan, he explained, belonged to him. He had shot it during a hunt. Therefore, he claimed, it was his rightful possession. A disagreement followed. Who should keep the bird? The one who had wounded it, or the one who was trying to save its life? According to tradition, wise elders were asked to settle the matter. After listening to both sides, they reached a decision. The swan should remain with Siddhartha. Life, they reasoned, belongs to those who protect it, not those who seek to destroy it. Whether entirely historical or partly symbolic, the story reveals an important aspect of Siddhartha's character. Compassion came naturally to him. The suffering of others affected him deeply. Even as a child, he seemed unable to ignore pain when he encountered it. This quality would later shape everything he taught. As the years passed, Siddhartha entered adolescence. He grew strong and capable. His education continued. His reputation within the kingdom flourished. People admired his intelligence. They respected his kindness. His future appeared increasingly promising. King Suddhodana must have felt encouraged. Surely, he thought, the predictions about becoming a wandering spiritual teacher would fade away. The prince was thriving. His path seemed clear. Yet beneath the surface, questions continued to grow. Not dramatic questions, not rebellious questions, simply quiet observations about the nature of life, the kind of thoughts that emerge during still moments, the kind that arrive unexpectedly while watching clouds drift across the sky or listening to rain fall beyond a window. Sometimes Siddhartha would sit alone beneath a tree. He would watch the world around him with unusual attention. The movement of insects through the grass, the flight of birds overhead, the changing light of the afternoon. Many years later, followers would remember these moments and see in them the early signs of a contemplative mind, a mind naturally inclined toward reflection. One day, according to traditional accounts, Siddhartha accompanied members of the royal household to observe agricultural work. Farmers moved through the fields. Oxen pulled ploughs across the earth. The work was ordinary, necessary, a familiar part of daily life. Yet as Siddhartha watched closely, he noticed something others ignored. The plough disturbed the soil. Small insects emerged. Birds descended to feed upon them. Life depended upon life. One creature survived because another suffered. The young prince found himself contemplating this cycle. The realization lingered in his thoughts. Even within peaceful fields, struggle existed. Even beneath beauty, hardship could be found. It was a small observation, yet perhaps it planted one of the first seeds of deeper inquiry. For the moment, however, the palace remained his home. The walls still sheltered him from much of the world's reality. Comfort surrounded him, opportunity awaited him, and the future seemed secure. Yet beyond the palace gates, life continued in all its complexity. People grew old. People became ill. People experienced loss. People searched for meaning. Sooner or later, Siddhartha would encounter these realities for himself. And when he did, the questions already stirring quietly within him would begin to demand answers. As this chapter gently comes to a close, imagine the young prince walking through palace gardens at sunset. The air is cool. The trees sway softly in the evening breeze. Golden light filters through the leaves. Everything appears peaceful. Everything appears complete. Yet beyond the horizon, experiences await that will transform his understanding forever. The sheltered world of childhood cannot last indefinitely. The time is approaching when Siddhartha will leave the safety of the palace and encounter realities his father hoped to keep hidden. And those encounters will change the course of his life forever. For many years, Siddhartha's life unfolded within the comfort and beauty of the royal palace. The gardens remained peaceful. The halls echoed with music and laughter. The future appeared secure. His father, King Suddhodana, continued to believe that the predictions made at Siddhartha's birth could still be influenced. If his son remained surrounded by happiness and prosperity, perhaps he would never feel compelled to abandon worldly life. Perhaps he would become the great ruler the king hoped for. And so the palace walls continued to shield him from many of life's harsher realities. Yet no wall, no matter how carefully constructed, can separate a person from the truth forever. As Siddhartha entered adulthood, his curiosity about the world beyond the palace began to grow. The sights and sounds of life outside the royal grounds called to him. He wished to see the villages, the roads, the people, the everyday world that existed beyond the carefully managed environment of his upbringing. Eventually, permission was granted for him to leave the palace and travel through the surrounding countryside. According to tradition, preparations were made in advance. The king instructed attendants to ensure that only pleasant scenes greeted the prince. Roads were cleaned, celebrations were arranged, anything considered troubling was removed from sight. Yet life is not so easily organized. Reality has a way of appearing precisely when we least expect it. And so began a series of encounters that would change Siddhartha forever. These encounters are remembered as the Four Sights. For more than 2,000 years, they have been regarded as pivotal moments in the story of the Buddha. Whether every detail occurred exactly as later traditions describe, their meaning remains powerful. Each sight revealed a truth about existence that Siddhartha had never fully considered. Each one opened a door, and once opened, those doors could never be closed again. On the first journey, Siddhartha rode through the streets in a chariot. The day was bright. People moved about their daily lives. Merchants sold goods. Children played. The world appeared lively and vibrant. Then, among the crowd, Siddhartha noticed someone unlike anyone he had ever seen before. The man's hair was white. His back was bent. His movements were slow and uncertain. Deep lines marked his face. Each step seemed to require effort. The prince watched with surprise. He turned to his companion and asked what had happened to the man. Why did he appear this way? His companion hesitated before answering. Then he explained. The man was old. This was the natural result of aging. Over time, strength fades. Hair changes color. The body grows weaker. Every person who lives long enough experiences old age. Siddhartha listened carefully. The explanation unsettled him. Every person, even kings, even princes, even himself, the answer was yes. No one was exempt. No wealth, no power, no privilege. Old age eventually touches everyone. The realization lingered in his thoughts long after the journey ended. For the first time, he had glimpsed a truth hidden from him since childhood. Nothing remains unchanged forever. On another excursion, Siddhartha encountered the second sight. This time, he saw a man suffering from illness. The man appeared weak and exhausted. His body trembled. His face showed signs of pain. Again, Siddhartha was puzzled. He had lived among healthy people his entire life. The sight felt unfamiliar, almost shocking. He asked what had happened. His companion explained that sickness was a natural part of life. People become ill. Bodies fail. Strength can disappear without warning. Disease affects the rich and the poor alike. No one can guarantee perfect health forever. Siddhartha's concern deepened. He began to understand that life contained vulnerabilities he had never been allowed to see. Even those who appeared strong today could become weak tomorrow. Even comfort offered no permanent protection. The certainty he had always assumed began to soften. Questions emerged. Questions with no easy answers. The third sight would prove even more profound. During another journey beyond the palace walls, Siddhartha noticed a group of people gathered together. Their expressions were solemn, their movements slow. The atmosphere felt heavy. At the center of the gathering lay a still figure, covered with cloth, silent, motionless. The prince asked what was happening. His companion explained that the person had died. Life had ended. Family and friends were preparing for the final rites. Once again, Siddhartha asked a question. Would this happen to everyone? Would all people eventually die? The answer was unavoidable. Yes, every living being must one day face death. No status, no achievement, no possession can prevent it forever. Everything born eventually passes away. For a long time, Siddhartha remained quiet. The realization struck him deeply. The beauty of life suddenly seemed intertwined with its fragility. Every joyful moment existed alongside the certainty of change. Every relationship carried the possibility of loss. The world he thought he understood no longer appeared quite the same. Many of us experience similar moments in our own lives. Perhaps not all at once, perhaps gradually. A first encounter with illness, the aging of a parent, the loss of a loved one, experiences that remind us of truths we often prefer not to think about. Siddhartha was encountering those truths for the first time, and they awakened something within him, not despair, not hopelessness, but a profound desire to understand. If suffering exists, why does it exist? If change is unavoidable, how should one live? If death awaits all living beings, is there a deeper meaning beyond fear and loss? These questions followed him like shadows. Yet one final encounter remained, an encounter that would provide a glimpse of another possibility. During a later journey, Siddhartha saw a wandering ascetic. The man possessed few belongings. His clothing was simple. He carried no signs of wealth or status. Yet unlike the previous figures Siddhartha had encountered, this man appeared calm, peaceful, serene. His face reflected neither anxiety nor despair. Instead, he moved through the world with quiet purpose. Curious, Siddhartha asked about him. His companion explained that the man was a spiritual seeker, someone who had left ordinary life behind in order to search for truth and understanding, someone who devoted himself to contemplation and wisdom. The sight affected Siddhartha in a different way. For the first time since confronting old age, sickness, and death, he glimpsed the possibility of an answer. Not a complete answer, not a simple solution, but a path, a direction. The ascetic seemed to embody a peace that did not depend upon wealth or comfort, a peace rooted in something deeper, something inward. The image stayed with him. Again and again, his thoughts returned to it. The old man, the sick man, the funeral procession, the wandering seeker, 4 simple encounters. Yet together they transformed his understanding of existence. The palace no longer felt the same. Its pleasures seemed temporary, its comforts incomplete. The questions growing within him became impossible to ignore. At night, he reflected upon what he had seen. He considered the fate shared by all human beings. Aging, illness, death. No amount of luxury could erase these realities. No amount of distraction could make them disappear. And if suffering touched every life, then surely understanding it must be one of the most important pursuits imaginable. The prince who had once accepted the world as it appeared now found himself searching beneath the surface, looking beyond appearances, seeking something lasting amidst constant change. The 4 sights marked a turning point, not because they immediately provided answers, but because they awakened the questions that would guide the rest of his life. Questions that continue to resonate with people even today. As this chapter gently comes to a close, imagine Siddhartha standing quietly beneath the evening sky. The palace lights glow in the distance. The stars emerge overhead. The world appears unchanged. Yet within him, everything is beginning to shift. The comfortable certainty of youth is giving way to deeper understanding. The journey toward awakening has begun. And soon, Siddhartha will make a decision that will alter the course of his life forever. A decision remembered throughout history as the Great Renunciation. The questions awakened by the 4 sights did not disappear. They lingered within Siddhartha's mind during the day. They accompanied him into the quiet hours of the evening. They returned each morning when he opened his eyes. Again and again, his thoughts drifted toward the realities he had encountered. Old age, illness, death, and the peaceful seeker who had chosen a different path. The palace remained as beautiful as ever. The gardens still bloomed, musicians still performed, festivals still filled the calendar. Yet something had changed, not in the world around him, but within him. The comforts that once seemed complete now felt temporary. The pleasures that once entertained him no longer answered the questions growing inside his heart. Many people experience moments like this during their lives. Moments when familiar routines suddenly feel insufficient. Moments when success, comfort, or achievement fail to satisfy a deeper longing. A longing not for more possessions, not for greater status, but for understanding. Siddhartha had reached such a moment, and the feeling continued to grow. By this time, Siddhartha had entered adulthood. He had married a noblewoman named Yasudhara. Accounts describe her as intelligent, graceful, and deeply respected. Together, they shared a life of privilege and security. Before long, they welcomed a son into their family. The child was named Rahula. His birth brought joy to the royal household. King Suddhodana was delighted. The arrival of a grandson seemed to strengthen the future of the family. Perhaps now, the king hoped, Siddhartha would fully embrace the responsibilities of royal life. Perhaps marriage and fatherhood would anchor him firmly within the world. Yet the opposite occurred. The birth of his son deepened Siddhartha's reflections. Holding a child in his arms, he became even more aware of life's fragility. The cycle of birth, aging, sickness, and death suddenly felt more personal, more immediate. The questions that had arisen after the 4 sights became impossible to ignore. How could one protect a child from suffering? How could anyone escape change? Was there a path beyond fear, loss, and uncertainty? These were no longer abstract ideas. They had become urgent questions. Questions touching every aspect of existence. At night, while others slept, Siddhartha often found himself awake. The palace grew quiet. Lanterns flickered softly. Moonlight illuminated the gardens, and in those silent hours, he reflected deeply. The more he contemplated life, the more convinced he became that he could not remain where he was. The answers he sought would not be found through luxury. They would not be found through power. They would not be found through wealth. If understanding existed, he would have to search for it himself. The decision was not easy. Far from it. Later generations would sometimes describe his departure in simple terms. Yet the reality must have been profoundly difficult. He loved his family. He respected his father. He cared deeply for those around him. Leaving meant walking away from everything familiar, everything comfortable, everything secure. It meant embracing uncertainty. And yet the call toward understanding had become stronger than fear. One evening, Siddhartha reached a decision. He would leave the palace. He would leave behind his title, his wealth, his future as a ruler. He would become a seeker, a wanderer in search of truth. This moment is remembered throughout Buddhist history as the Great Renunciation. The word renunciation can sometimes sound severe to modern ears. But for Siddhartha, it was not an act of rejection. It was an act of devotion. A commitment to discovering whether suffering could truly be understood, whether peace could truly be found, whether there existed a path that might benefit all people. According to tradition, the night of his departure was calm and still. The palace rested in silence. Most had already gone to sleep. The air was cool. The stars shone overhead. Siddhartha moved quietly through the halls. He paused one final time outside the chamber where Yasodhara and the infant Rahula slept. Ancient accounts describe him standing in the doorway, gazing upon them with love and tenderness. He knew that waking them would make departure far more difficult, perhaps impossible, and so he remained still, observing them peacefully at rest, holding the moment in his heart. Then, with great resolve, he turned away. The decision had been made. The journey had begun. Accompanied by his loyal attendant Channa and his trusted horse Kanthaka, Siddhartha left the palace grounds under cover of darkness. The road stretched before them, quiet and empty. The sounds of the city faded behind them. With every mile traveled, the life he had known grew more distant. One can imagine the emotions that may have accompanied that journey: sadness, uncertainty, determination, perhaps even fear. After all, Siddhartha was leaving behind a life that many people would consider ideal. Most would never willingly abandon such comfort. Yet he believed that the search for truth was worth the sacrifice. As dawn approached, they reached a point where Siddhartha knew there could be no turning back. The time had come to fully embrace his new path. According to tradition, he removed his royal garments, the fine clothing that symbolized wealth and status, the garments of a prince. In their place, he adopted the simple robes of a wandering seeker. He cut his hair, a symbolic gesture representing the abandonment of worldly identity. The transformation was profound. Only hours earlier, he had been a royal heir. Now he stood as a humble spiritual pilgrim, possessing little, owning little, certain of only one thing: his determination to seek understanding. Siddhartha then instructed Channa to return to the palace. The faithful attendant was reluctant. He had served the prince loyally for many years. Parting was difficult. Tradition tells us that even the horse Kanthaka seemed distressed by the separation. The scene is often portrayed as deeply emotional, a farewell not only to companions, but to an entire chapter of life. Eventually, Channa departed. The prince who had once lived surrounded by servants and luxury now found himself alone beneath the vast sky, alone upon an uncertain road, and yet perhaps not entirely alone, for he carried with him a question that had become his constant companion, a question shared by countless seekers throughout history. What is the true nature of suffering, and can it be overcome? Ahead lay forests, teachers, years of discipline, periods of doubt, moments of profound insight. None of it could yet be seen. The future remained hidden, but Siddhartha had taken the first step, and often the first step is the most difficult. Many spiritual traditions recognize this truth: the courage to begin, the willingness to leave behind certainty, the openness to follow a question wherever it may lead. These qualities appeared in Siddhartha's life that night, not because he possessed all the answers, but because he was willing to search for them. As the sun slowly rose over the plains of northern India, a new chapter in his life began. The prince was gone. In his place stood a seeker, a traveler, a student of life itself. The palace lay behind him, the unknown stretched before him, and somewhere along that path awaited the awakening that would one day change the world. For now, however, Siddhartha's journey was only beginning. The years ahead would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. He would study with renowned teachers, practice extreme forms of discipline, push himself to the limits of endurance. And through those experiences, he would gradually discover that wisdom often emerges not from excess nor from deprivation, but from a path that lies between the two. As this chapter gently comes to a close, imagine Siddhartha standing alone at the edge of a forest. Morning light filters through the trees. The sounds of birds greet the new day. The road behind him fades into the distance. The road ahead disappears among the shadows. For a moment, all is quiet. The search has begun, and the answers he seeks remain hidden just beyond the horizon. As the morning sun rose over the northern plains of India, Siddhartha Gautama found himself standing at the beginning of an entirely new life. The royal palaces of his youth were now behind him. The comforts and privileges he had known since birth belonged to the past. Ahead stretched an uncertain road, a road without guarantees, without servants, without luxury, without certainty. Yet for the first time, Siddhartha felt free to pursue the question that had become the center of his life. How could suffering be understood? And could it somehow be overcome? For many people, leaving behind a familiar life would have been enough. But Siddhartha did not leave merely to wander. He left to learn, to seek wisdom wherever it might be found. And so he began traveling across the countryside, meeting teachers, philosophers, ascetics, and spiritual practitioners. Ancient India offered many paths for those seeking understanding. Different teachers proposed different answers. Some emphasized meditation, others focused on rituals. Some believed truth could be discovered through intense intellectual study. Others believed wisdom emerged through discipline and self-denial. Siddhartha approached these teachings with sincerity. He did not assume he already knew the answer. Instead, he listened carefully, observed closely, and practiced diligently. One of the first renowned teachers he encountered was known as Alara Kalama. Alara was respected for his mastery of meditation. Students traveled great distances to learn from him. His teachings focused upon achieving highly refined states of concentration and awareness. Siddhartha applied himself wholeheartedly. His intelligence and determination quickly became apparent. What took others years to master, he seemed able to grasp with unusual speed. Before long, he achieved the same levels of meditative attainment as his teacher. Alara was impressed. Some accounts suggest that he even invited Siddhartha to remain as an equal, helping guide future students. It was a remarkable accomplishment, yet something still felt incomplete. The states of meditation were peaceful, profoundly peaceful, but they were temporary. Eventually, the meditation ended. Ordinary experience returned. The deeper questions remained. Siddhartha respected what he had learned, but he sensed there was still further to go, and so he continued his journey. Eventually, he studied under another respected teacher named Uddaka Ramaputta. Once again, Siddhartha devoted himself completely to the practice. Once again, he progressed rapidly. The teachings led him into increasingly subtle states of consciousness, experiences so refined that ordinary language struggles to describe them. Many seekers would have considered such achievements the ultimate goal. Yet Siddhartha remained unsatisfied, not because the teachings lacked value, but because they did not fully answer the question that had led him away from the palace. The problem of suffering still remained. Temporary states of peace were not the same as permanent freedom. Once again, he moved on. At this point, Siddhartha began exploring a path that many spiritual seekers of his time considered essential. The path of extreme asceticism. Throughout ancient India, some believed that liberation could be attained by rejecting physical comfort entirely. The body was viewed as a source of attachment, a source of distraction. Perhaps they reasoned freedom could be found by denying its needs. Siddhartha committed himself to this approach with extraordinary determination. If there was wisdom to be found in self-discipline, he intended to discover it completely. Years passed. He lived in forests. He slept beneath trees. He endured heat, cold, hunger, and discomfort. His possessions became few, his lifestyle increasingly severe. Over time, the practices grew more extreme. According to traditional accounts, Siddhartha reduced his food intake dramatically, sometimes surviving on only a few grains of rice each day. His body became thin, painfully thin. The strong prince who had once lived within palace walls became almost unrecognizable. His ribs showed beneath his skin. His muscles weakened. Walking became difficult, yet he continued, convinced that if an answer existed along this path, he must pursue it fully. 5 fellow ascetics joined him during this period. They admired his dedication. They respected his determination. Together they practiced severe disciplines, believing they were moving closer to liberation. Yet despite years of effort, Siddhartha remained honest with himself. The answer had not appeared. The suffering he sought to understand had not been conquered. His body had become weaker, but wisdom had not necessarily become stronger. One day, after years of deprivation, Siddhartha found himself sitting quietly in contemplation. His strength was nearly exhausted, his energy almost gone. And in that stillness, an important realization emerged. A realization that would eventually change the course of history. He began to understand that neither extreme luxury nor extreme self-denial provided the answer. As a prince, he had experienced abundance. As an ascetic, he had experienced deprivation. Neither had brought true understanding. Both represented forms of imbalance. Both, in different ways, could become distractions. The insight was simple, yet profound. Truth might not lie at either extreme. Perhaps wisdom could be found along a middle path, a path avoiding both indulgence and harsh self-punishment, a path grounded in clarity rather than excess. Today, this idea is known as the middle way, but at the time, it was merely a growing intuition, a possibility, a new direction emerging from years of experience. Soon afterward, an event occurred that would become one of the most memorable moments in Buddhist tradition. A young woman named Sujata encountered Siddhartha near the village where she lived. Seeing his weakened condition, she offered him a simple meal, rice cooked with milk, nothing elaborate, nothing luxurious, simply nourishment. At first glance, the event appears ordinary, a hungry traveler receiving food. Yet its significance was far greater. By accepting the meal, Siddhartha made a deliberate choice. He chose life over self-destruction, balance over extremism, wisdom over rigid ideology. His 5 companions were shocked. From their perspective, he had abandoned the path. They believed he had failed. Disappointed, they left him and continued on their own. Yet Siddhartha remained calm. For perhaps the first time in many years, he felt he was moving toward understanding rather than away from it. Strength gradually returned to his body. His mind became clearer, his thoughts steadier. The years of seeking had taught him much, not only through success, but through disappointment, not only through achievement, but through failure. Sometimes wisdom arrives in this way, not as a sudden revelation, but as the gradual recognition that certain paths do not lead where we hoped. Siddhartha's journey had already taken him through wealth and poverty, comfort and hardship, learning and uncertainty. Each experience had contributed something valuable. Each had revealed part of the truth. Yet the final answer remained just beyond reach. Soon, he would sit beneath a tree beside the banks of the Neranjara River. There he would make a final commitment. He would remain seated until he either discovered the truth he sought or died trying. The years of wandering were drawing to a close. The search itself was about to enter its final stage. As this chapter gently comes to an end, imagine Siddhartha resting beneath the shade of a great tree. The afternoon breeze moves softly through the leaves. Birds call in the distance. The river flows quietly nearby. For the first time in many years, his mind feels balanced, not pulled toward pleasure, not trapped in suffering, simply present, still, attentive. The long journey of seeking has prepared him for what comes next. And soon, beneath the spreading branches of a sacred tree, one of history's most remarkable moments will unfold. The moment of awakening, the moment the seeker becomes the Buddha. After years of searching, Siddhartha Gautama found himself standing at the edge of a quiet river. The long journey that had begun with his departure from the palace had carried him through many landscapes, forests and villages, mountains and valleys, places of learning and places of solitude. He had studied with respected teachers, practiced profound forms of meditation, endured years of extreme self-denial, and through all of it, one question remained. What is the true cause of suffering, and is there a path beyond it? Now, as he rested beneath the open sky, Siddhartha sensed that his search was approaching a turning point. Not because someone had provided the answer, not because a teacher had revealed a hidden secret, but because experience itself had gradually prepared him. The years had stripped away assumptions. They had challenged certainty. They had taught him what did not work. And sometimes, understanding begins not with discovering what is true, but with letting go of what is not. Near the banks of the Neranjara River stood a great fig tree. Its branches spread wide above the earth. Its leaves moved gently in the breeze. The tree offered shade, stillness, and a sense of quiet permanence. Today it is remembered as the Bodhi tree, the tree of awakening. Yet on that day, it was simply a tree beside a river, a place where a weary seeker chose to sit. Before taking his seat, Siddhartha is said to have made a solemn vow. He would remain there until he discovered the truth he sought. No matter how long it took, no matter what difficulties arose, he would not abandon the search. Imagine the scene. The afternoon sunlight filtering through the leaves, the distant sound of birds, the river flowing steadily nearby, the earth cool beneath him. No audience, no followers, no celebration, only a solitary man sitting quietly beneath a tree. One of the remarkable aspects of this moment is its simplicity. History often remembers battles, coronations, conquests. Yet one of the most influential events in human history began with stillness, with a person sitting quietly and looking deeply into the nature of existence. As evening approached, Siddhartha settled into meditation. His breathing slowed. His attention became steady. The world around him grew quiet. The search that had carried him across years of wandering now turned inward. Ancient Buddhist traditions describe what happened next, using powerful symbolic imagery. These stories are not merely historical accounts. They are also representations of inner struggles that every human being encounters. According to tradition, Siddhartha was approached by Mara. Mara is often described as a tempter, a deceiver, or a personification of illusion. In some stories, Mara appears as a powerful being seeking to prevent awakening. In others, Mara represents the fears, desires, doubts, and distractions that arise within the human mind. Whether understood literally or symbolically, the meaning remains profound. As Siddhartha sat beneath the tree, every obstacle appeared, every fear, every temptation, every uncertainty. Mara first attempted to distract him through desire. Visions of pleasure appeared before him. Comfort, luxury, the very things he had left behind years earlier. Yet Siddhartha remained unmoved. He had already learned that pleasure alone could not provide lasting peace. The visions faded. Next came fear. Dark clouds gathered. Storms arose. Thunder shook the heavens. Powerful forces surrounded him. At least, so the ancient stories tell us. Yet even amid the storm, Siddhartha remained calm. He neither resisted nor surrendered. He simply observed. The storm passed. Then came doubt, perhaps the most subtle challenge of all. Questions emerged. Who are you to seek awakening? Why continue? What if the search is hopeless? What if understanding is impossible? These are questions familiar to many people. Whenever we attempt something meaningful, doubt often follows close behind. Yet Siddhartha had spent years cultivating patience and clarity. He neither fought the doubts nor believed them. He simply allowed them to pass. According to tradition, Mara finally challenged his very right to pursue enlightenment. Who could testify to his worthiness? Who could confirm that he deserved awakening? In response, Siddhartha reached down and touched the earth. This simple gesture became one of the most famous images in Buddhist art, the earth-touching mudra. By touching the ground, Siddhartha called the earth itself as witness. Not a king, not a priest, not a teacher, the earth. The same earth that supports every living being. The same earth that remains beneath all divisions and distinctions. The gesture symbolized complete confidence. Not arrogance, not pride. Simply certainty born from direct experience. The challenge dissolved. The night grew deeper. Stars filled the sky. The world became still, and Siddhartha continued his meditation. As the hours passed, insights began to emerge. Not intellectual theories, not beliefs accepted on faith, direct understanding. He saw how all things arise through causes and conditions, how actions create consequences, how attachment gives rise to suffering, how the desire to cling to what constantly changes leads to dissatisfaction. He observed the endless cycles through which beings struggle, seeking happiness, avoiding pain, yet often becoming trapped by the very things they pursue. Gradually, the nature of suffering became clear, and with that understanding came another realization. If suffering has causes, then those causes can be understood. If those causes can be understood, they can be released. And if they can be released, freedom becomes possible. As dawn approached, the final pieces fell into place. The search that had begun years earlier reached its fulfillment. The confusion that once clouded his understanding dissolved. The questions that had driven him from the palace found their answers, not through belief, not through authority, but through direct insight into the nature of reality. As the morning star appeared in the sky, Siddhartha Gautama awakened. From that moment forward, he became known as the Buddha, the Awakened One. The title was not a mark of status. It was not a rank or a position. It described a state of understanding, a person who had awakened from ignorance, a person who had seen clearly, a person who had discovered a path leading beyond suffering. For a time, the newly awakened Buddha simply remained where he was, quiet, still, reflecting upon what had occurred. The world around him had not changed. The river still flowed. The trees still swayed in the breeze. Birds still sang. Yet everything appeared different, or perhaps more accurately, everything appeared exactly as it was, free from distortion, free from illusion, seen with complete clarity. Ancient traditions tell us that he spent several weeks near the Bodhi tree, contemplating the insights he had gained. There was no rush, no desire to proclaim his discovery immediately. The understanding was profound. It required time to absorb. One can imagine those quiet days, morning sunlight filtering through leaves, gentle breezes crossing the river, the awakened Buddha sitting peacefully beneath the tree, not seeking anything, not chasing anything, simply resting in understanding. Eventually, however, a new question arose. Should he teach what he had discovered? Could others understand it? The truth seemed subtle, difficult to express. Words often struggle to capture deep experience. For a time, he considered remaining silent, yet compassion guided him. He remembered the countless people living with fear, confusion, and suffering. He remembered his own years of searching, and gradually, a decision formed. He would teach, not because he wished for followers, not because he desired recognition, but because others might benefit. Others might discover the same path. And so, the Buddha prepared to leave the Bodhi tree. The search was over. A new journey was about to begin. The journey of sharing what he had learned with the world. As this chapter gently comes to a close, imagine the first light of dawn spreading across the horizon, the stars slowly fading, the leaves of the Bodhi tree moving softly in the morning breeze, and beneath its branches sits a man transformed not by power, wealth, or conquest, but by understanding. The prince who left the palace seeking answers has become the Buddha, the Awakened One. And in our next chapter, we will follow him as he begins teaching the Dharma, offering the insights of his awakening to all who are willing to listen. For many weeks after his awakening beneath the Bodhi tree, the Buddha remained near the place where his search had come to an end. The great questions that had guided his life had finally found resolution. The restless seeking that had carried him from palace walls to forest paths had come to rest. Yet another journey was about to begin. A different kind of journey. Not a journey of searching, but a journey of sharing. The Buddha reflected deeply upon what he had discovered. The insights seemed clear to him. Yet he wondered whether others would understand. Human beings often become attached to familiar ways of thinking. They cling to habits, beliefs, expectations. The truth he had realized was subtle, simple in one sense, yet difficult to see clearly. For a time, he considered remaining silent. Perhaps the understanding was too profound to explain. Perhaps words would only create confusion. Yet as he reflected upon the countless people struggling with fear, dissatisfaction, loss, and uncertainty, compassion arose within him. He remembered his own years of searching, the questions, the doubts, the longing to understand, and he realized that there would be others ready to listen, others ready to begin their own journey. So the Buddha rose from beneath the Bodhi tree and set out once again. His destination was a place known as the Deer Park at Sarnath. There, he hoped to find the 5 ascetics who had once practiced alongside him, the same companions who had abandoned him when he chose to accept nourishment and follow the middle way. As he traveled, the countryside stretched peacefully around him. The rivers flowed as they always had. Villagers tended their fields. Merchants walked dusty roads. Life continued according to its familiar rhythms. Yet something extraordinary had changed. The man walking those roads was no longer searching for answers. He carried them within him. Eventually, he arrived near the deer park. The 5 ascetics saw him approaching from a distance. At first, they were skeptical. They remembered the man who had abandoned their severe practices, the man they believed had lost his way. According to tradition, they agreed among themselves not to greet him with special respect. Yet as the Buddha drew closer, something about his presence affected them. Perhaps it was the calmness in his expression. Perhaps it was the quiet confidence he carried. Whatever the reason, their attitudes softened. When he arrived, they welcomed him. And there, in the peaceful surroundings of the deer park, the Buddha delivered his first teaching. This event is often called the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, a phrase rich with symbolism. A wheel begins to move, and once it moves, its influence spreads outward. The teachings shared that day would eventually travel across continents and centuries. But on that morning, there were only 6 people gathered together, 1 teacher, 5 listeners, a small beginning. The Buddha spoke first about the lessons learned through his own experience. He described the dangers of extremes. On one side lay indulgence, the endless pursuit of pleasure and comfort. On the other side lay harsh self-denial, the extreme asceticism he had practiced for years. Neither path led to awakening. Instead, he taught the middle way, a balanced approach to life, a path avoiding both excess and deprivation. From there, he introduced what would become known as the 4 Noble Truths. These teachings formed the foundation of everything that followed. The first truth acknowledged the reality of suffering, not as a pessimistic observation, but as an honest one. Life contains difficulties, pain, loss, disappointment, change. No one escapes these experiences entirely. The second truth explained that suffering arises from attachment, from clinging to things we wish would remain unchanged, from craving what we do not possess, from resisting the natural flow of life. The third truth offered hope. If attachment creates suffering, then freedom from attachment makes peace possible. The cycle can be interrupted. the burden can be released. The fourth truth described a path leading toward that freedom. A practical path, a path of wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental cultivation. Not a path of blind belief, but one of direct experience. The teachings resonated deeply with the 5 ascetics. One by one, understanding began to emerge. The first followers of the Buddha had appeared. The community that would later become known as the Sangha had begun. From this modest gathering, something remarkable unfolded. Word spread. Travelers shared stories of the awakened teacher. Curious individuals came to listen. Some were wealthy, others poor. Some were scholars, others simple laborers. Kings and farmers alike found themselves drawn to his teachings. One of the most striking aspects of the Buddha's approach was his openness. He did not reserve his teachings for a particular class of people. He welcomed anyone willing to learn. In a world often divided by status and hierarchy, this was unusual. The Buddha recognized that suffering touches all human beings, and therefore the path beyond suffering should be available to all. As months became years, his circle of followers continued to grow. Some chose to become monks. Others remained householders while practicing the teachings in daily life. Communities formed. Monasteries gradually emerged. Yet the Buddha himself remained remarkably simple. He owned little, traveled frequently, and taught wherever people gathered to listen. Many stories survive from this period of his life. Stories of conversations beneath trees, discussions with kings, encounters with merchants and farmers, questions posed by seekers from every walk of life. Again and again, the Buddha demonstrated patience. Rather than demanding belief, he encouraged investigation. Rather than insisting upon authority, he invited people to examine their own experience. This practical quality became one of the defining characteristics of his teaching. He often adapted his explanations to suit the needs of those listening. A farmer might hear examples drawn from agriculture. A merchant might receive illustrations based on trade. A ruler might hear lessons about leadership and responsibility. The goal remained the same: to help people understand the causes of suffering and discover a path toward greater peace. As the years passed, countless individuals benefited from these teachings. Some experienced profound transformations. Others found small but meaningful improvements in their daily lives. Not everyone became enlightened. Not everyone became a monk. But many found wisdom, compassion, clarity, and hope. The Buddha's reputation continued to grow, yet he remained grounded. He did not present himself as a god, nor did he claim to possess supernatural power over others. Instead, he described himself as someone who had discovered a path that others could walk for themselves. In this sense, his role resembled that of a guide, someone pointing toward a destination, but not carrying others there. Each individual still had to take the journey, one step at a time. Perhaps that is one reason his teachings have endured. They do not ask people to surrender their experience. They encourage people to examine it more carefully, to look deeply, to observe honestly, to cultivate awareness and compassion. As this chapter gently draws to a close, imagine the Buddha seated beneath a tree, surrounded by listeners. The afternoon sun filters through the leaves, A soft breeze moves through the grass. Birds call in the distance. The gathering is quiet, attentive, peaceful. No grand palace, no throne, no display of power. Only a teacher sharing what he has learned. And around him, people listening with open hearts. The wheel of Dharma has begun to turn. Its movement will continue long after the teacher himself is gone. And in our next chapter, we will follow the Buddha into the final years of his life as he continues teaching, guiding others, and preparing for his last journey. For many years after his awakening, the Buddha traveled across the northern regions of India. Season after season passed. The rains came and went. The rivers continued their ancient journeys. Kingdoms rose and changed. Generations grew older. And throughout it all, the Buddha continued teaching. He walked countless roads, visited villages and cities, spoke with kings and laborers, guided monks and householders alike. His days followed a simple rhythm: travel, teaching, meditation, conversation, reflection. The fame that surrounded him continued to grow, but his manner remained unchanged. He still wore simple robes, still carried few possessions, still accepted food offered by others. The prince who had once lived in luxury had become a teacher known throughout the land, yet he retained the humility of a wandering monk. As the decades passed, many of his closest followers matured into respected teachers themselves. The community of monks expanded. Teachings that had once been shared with only 5 ascetics were now being carried throughout large regions of India. The wheel of Dharma continued to turn. Many people experienced profound transformation through the Buddha's guidance. Others found comfort during difficult times. Some learned to approach life with greater compassion. Others discovered a deeper sense of peace. The influence of his teaching spread steadily, not through force or conquest, but through personal experience. One conversation, one lesson, one life at a time. Eventually, however, even the most remarkable lives encounter the reality that Siddhartha himself had first witnessed many years earlier. The reality of aging. The Buddha had taught for decades. His hair had grown grey. His body had changed. The strength of youth had gradually given way to the natural limitations of age. Yet he remained calm regarding this process. After all, aging was not a surprise. It was one of the truths that had inspired his search from the beginning. One of the 4 sights. One of the realities shared by all living beings. Ancient accounts describe the Buddha speaking openly about his advancing years. At one point, he compared his body to an old cart held together with repairs and careful maintenance. The image is both simple and relatable, a reminder that even those possessing great wisdom remain subject to the laws of nature. No one escapes change. No one remains young forever. The Buddha had never promised otherwise. His teachings did not seek to eliminate aging, illness, or death. Instead, they offered a different relationship to these experiences, a way of meeting them with understanding rather than fear. As he entered his 80th year, the Buddha continued traveling despite the challenges of age. His commitment to helping others remained strong. Wherever people wished to learn, he continued to teach. Eventually, he began what would become his final journey. Traveling with a group of disciples, He moved from place to place, offering teachings along the way. The atmosphere surrounding these travels must have felt different, not because anyone knew exactly when the end would come, but because the passage of time had become increasingly visible. The teacher who had guided so many lives was approaching the final chapter of his own. One significant event occurred near the town of Pava. There, a blacksmith named Kunda invited the Buddha and his companions to share a meal. According to tradition, Kunda prepared the food with great care and respect. The Buddha accepted the offering. After the meal, however, he became seriously ill. Despite discomfort and weakness, he continued traveling. His concern remained focused not on himself, but on others. In fact, tradition tells us that he specifically instructed his followers not to blame Kunda for what had happened. The meal had been offered with sincere generosity. No fault should be attached to an act of kindness. Even in illness, the Buddha demonstrated compassion and understanding. The journey continued, slowly, carefully. Eventually, the traveling group arrived near a place called Kushinagar. There, in a grove of sal trees, the Buddha recognized that the end of his life was approaching. The setting feels appropriate. Not a palace, not a fortress, not a monument. A grove of trees, a peaceful, natural setting, very much in harmony with the simplicity that had characterized his life. The sal trees stood quietly around him, their branches reaching toward the sky, their leaves moving gently in the breeze. The atmosphere was calm, almost timeless. The Buddha instructed his companions to prepare a resting place between two trees. Then he lay down on his right side, a posture that became known as the lion's pose, dignified, peaceful, relaxed. His disciples gathered nearby. Many felt sadness. The teacher who had guided them for so many years would soon be gone. Questions arose, concerns emerged. Some struggled to imagine a world without his physical presence. The Buddha responded with characteristic wisdom. He reminded them that all conditioned things are impermanent. Everything that arises eventually passes away. This truth applied not only to kingdoms and mountains, not only to possessions and relationships. It also applied to teachers, to bodies, to lives. Impermanence was not a flaw in existence. It was part of its nature. The Buddha encouraged his followers to continue practicing diligently, to rely upon the teachings, to cultivate wisdom and compassion. He did not appoint a supreme successor. Instead, he pointed them toward the Dharma itself. The teachings would remain. The path would remain. The opportunity for awakening would remain. The physical teacher would pass away, but the truth he had discovered could still guide future generations. As evening approached, the atmosphere grew increasingly quiet. The sal trees stood motionless in the fading light. The disciples remained close, listening carefully, absorbing every word. One can imagine the mixture of emotions present in that moment. Gratitude, love, sadness, peace. For many of those gathered, the Buddha had transformed the course of their lives. His influence extended far beyond instruction. He had offered hope, direction, understanding. And now, the time had come to say farewell. Tradition preserves the Buddha's final recorded words. Though translations vary slightly, their meaning remains clear. All conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence. Simple words, yet profoundly meaningful. A final reminder of impermanence. A final encouragement toward mindful effort. A final expression of the wisdom that had shaped his entire life. As night deepened, the Buddha entered meditation. The accounts describe him passing through increasingly refined states of awareness, calm, focused, peaceful. Then, quietly, his life came to an end. The event became known as parinirvana, the final passing away of the Buddha. For those present, the loss was immense. Yet there was also a sense of completion. The journey that began with the birth of a prince in Lumbini had reached its conclusion. The child whose father hoped he would become a king had become something entirely different. A teacher, a guide, an awakened human being whose influence would continue long after his death. The rivers continued to flow. The stars continued to move across the sky. The trees continued to sway in the wind. The world remained much as it had always been. Yet because of one person's search for understanding, countless lives would never be the same. As this chapter gently comes to a close, imagine the grove of sal trees beneath the evening sky. The air is cool. The stars are beginning to appear. The disciples sit quietly among the trees, and at the center of the grove rests the teacher who spent his life helping others understand the nature of suffering and the possibility of peace. His journey has ended, but the wisdom he shared continues onward, carried through generations, across centuries, across continents, and into the present moment. In our final chapter, we will gently reflect upon the life of the Buddha and the timeless lessons that continue to inspire people around the world. And now, as our journey through the life of the Buddha gently draws to a close, let us take a few quiet moments simply to reflect. There is nothing more to learn tonight. No facts to memorize. No teachings to analyze. No conclusions you must reach. The story has been told. The journey has unfolded. And now, like a river slowly finding its way to the sea, we allow ourselves to settle into stillness. The life of Siddhartha Gautama began in comfort. A prince surrounded by beauty, protected from hardship, sheltered from uncertainty. Yet despite all the advantages that surrounded him, a question remained. A question that wealth could not answer. A question that comfort could not silence. A question that countless human beings have asked throughout history. How does one find lasting peace? Perhaps that is one reason his story continues to resonate after so many centuries. Because beneath the ancient settings and distant places, the questions remain familiar. We all experience change. We all experience uncertainty. We all encounter moments of joy and moments of sorrow. We all search in our own ways for understanding. The Buddha's journey reminds us that the search itself is part of being human. There is no shame in asking questions, no weakness in seeking wisdom, no failure in acknowledging uncertainty. The path toward understanding often begins exactly where Siddhartha's did, with curiosity, with observation, with a willingness to look deeply. As you rest tonight, imagine once again the many places we have visited together. The peaceful garden of Lumbini, the palace grounds where a young prince wandered beneath flowering trees, the roads where he encountered old age, sickness, and death, the forests where he spent years searching, the river flowing quietly beside the Bodhi tree, the deer park where he first shared his teachings, the grove of sal trees where his final journey came to an end. Each place forms part of a larger story. A story not merely about one individual, but about the human experience itself. The experience of seeking, learning, growing, and awakening. Perhaps one of the most comforting aspects of the Buddha's life is that he was not born with all the answers. He did not begin as an enlightened teacher. He began as a human being, a person trying to understand the world, a person confronting uncertainty, a person learning through experience, step by step, question by question, insight by insight. His wisdom emerged gradually, not through magic, not through sudden perfection, but through patience, reflection, compassion, and perseverance. There is something reassuring about that. The reminder that understanding often unfolds slowly, like dawn arriving over a distant horizon, not all at once, but little by little, light gradually replacing darkness, clarity gradually emerging from confusion. Many people imagine peace as something dramatic, a destination to be reached, a final achievement. Yet the Buddha often pointed towards something simpler, the possibility of being present with life as it is, the possibility of meeting each moment with awareness, the possibility of releasing some of the burdens we carry unnecessarily. As you continue listening, allow your breathing to remain soft and natural. There is nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to accomplish. Only this quiet moment, only the gentle sound of the story. Imagine sitting beneath the Bodhi tree on a calm evening. The air is cool, the leaves move softly overhead, the river flows nearby, the sky above is filled with stars. There is no urgency, no pressure, only stillness. The same stillness that existed more than 25 centuries ago. The same stillness available in every age. Sometimes we imagine that wisdom belongs only to great teachers. Yet the natural world offers its own lessons. The river teaches patience. It does not rush toward the ocean. It simply flows. The trees teach resilience. They bend with the wind rather than resisting it. The stars teach perspective. Their quiet presence reminds us how vast and mysterious existence truly is. Perhaps this is why so many of the Buddha's most important moments occurred outdoors. Beneath trees, beside rivers, along simple roads. Nature has a way of reminding us of what matters. It invites us to slow down, to observe, to listen, to become present. As the night deepens, allow the images from the story to drift gently through your imagination. A young prince walking through palace gardens. An old man moving slowly along a road. A wandering seeker beneath an open sky. A solitary figure sitting quietly beneath a tree. A teacher sharing wisdom with those gathered around him. A peaceful grove illuminated by starlight. There is no need to hold on to any image for long. Let them come and go naturally, like clouds passing across the sky, like leaves floating upon a stream, appearing, remaining briefly, then drifting onward. This too reflects one of the great themes of the Buddha's life, Everything changes, everything moves, everything flows. At first, this truth can seem unsettling, yet it can also be comforting. Difficult moments pass, worries pass, anxieties pass. The things that trouble us today may eventually dissolve like morning mist beneath the sun. The Buddha discovered that peace does not come from preventing change. It comes from learning how to live gracefully within it. Like a sailor working with the wind rather than fighting against it. Like a river finding its course around stones. Like a tree standing calmly through every season. As your body becomes heavier and more relaxed, allow yourself to release the events of the day, the conversations, the responsibilities, the unfinished tasks. They can wait until tomorrow. For now, there is only rest, only quiet, only the gentle rhythm of breath. Imagine the moon rising above distant mountains, silver light spreading across forests and rivers, the world growing still, the sounds of the day fading away. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell sounds softly. Then silence returns, deep, comforting, peaceful. The Buddha's story has reached its end, but perhaps the deeper journey continues. Not as a search for perfect answers, not as a struggle to become something different, but as a gentle invitation to observe life with greater kindness, greater patience, greater awareness, and perhaps in doing so, discover moments of peace that were present all along. As sleep begins to draw near, allow your thoughts to slow. Allow your attention to soften. Allow yourself to drift. The rivers continue to flow. The stars continue to shine. The trees continue to sway beneath the night sky. And somewhere in the stillness of this ancient story, there remains a simple reminder. Peace is often found not in reaching somewhere else, but in resting fully within this moment. And now, with the story complete and the night growing deeper around you, may you rest peacefully. May your mind become calm. May your heart become light. And may sleep come gently, like a quiet breeze moving through the leaves of a tree beneath the stars. Good night.